Hello everyone, welcome to Migrate with Indra, your guidance to skill migration program. Let's navigate your career abroad plan together. First, let me introduce Mr. Simon, registered immigration Mara agent. He's with us today. Hello, Mr. Simon, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay, so today in this program, we are going to ask Mr. Simon valuable questions. So we hope these questions will help you to build up your career in Australia. So let's get it started. So Mr. Simon, can you give us an overview? What is the current trends in Australia, specifically other countries? What is the current status in Australia? Can you give us an overview, Mr. Simon?
Okay, migration obviously has existed to Australia for a very long time, and there are different forms of migration and ways for people to come into the country, whether it's through perhaps a business program in the past, through family visas, through skilled migration, through employer sponsored visas. Regardless of which government is in place in Australia, over the 21 years that I've been working in this field, we've always seen a consistency for a consistent demand and appetite for skilled migration to Australia, because Australia has never been in a situation where we've had enough skilled workers on the ground in Australia to do the jobs that need to be done. So there is always a demand for skilled migration to Australia. But that being said, there are certain standards that need to be met and certain criteria that need to be met to allow people to come in, to ensure that the right type of people are coming into Australia if they're coming into Australia as workers.
Yeah. Okay, 21 years. How? That's a long time.
Yes, it's a very long time. Yes, yeah. I was a much younger person 21 years ago, I can assure you. Yes.
Okay. So, with your experiences, Mrs. Simon, as you think, what are the biggest challenges that the immigrants have to face every day when they're moving to another country?
I think it really depends on the personality of individuals as to the way that some people adapt to moving to another country. But I think that ultimately, the person who makes a decision to move to another country is the right type of person to settle into that country. I meet a lot of people who say that they might be interested and they explore the options, and then for one reason or another they might say, look, it's too hard, or I'm going to put that off for a little while and perhaps I'll revisit it later. The people who seize the opportunity are invariably go-getters and people who make the best out of a situation that is in front of them. But nevertheless, in terms of, perhaps challenges on arrival in Australia, there's obviously the Australian accent, which is different to an English accent or English as it's spoken in certain parts of Asia or in the US. There's that slight hurdle. When anybody arrives in a new place for the first time, it's how do you access certain services? How do you access enrolment for children to go into school? And how do you access transport services to get to where you need to go and so forth? But compared to the actual process of going through and getting a visa outcome, what people go through, it's my belief that what people go through after they've arrived is much easier than those earlier challenges of just getting the permission to come and live in a new country like Australia.
Okay, so as my knowledge, Mrs. Simon, I think accommodation is also a problem to immigrants, right? Do you have any of the solution for that in your program?
So Australia has at present, and we're talking in 2024, Australia has a housing shortage, which is very much a topic of the news locally. Whether it's around Australians looking for their own housing, or whether it's also around immigrants coming in who in some ways add some more pressure because they need housing as well. So it is difficult for Australians to find rental accommodation or to find houses to buy. It's more difficult for somebody who comes into Australia who doesn't have a rental history here, who doesn't have a history of working here, who doesn't have references, say, from local landlords. One of the services that we can provide to people who are coming in looking at finding accommodation is actually a full accommodation service, so that we can assist with finding rental accommodation for people that meets their needs. So, it's a single person, perhaps it's a housing share. If it's a family of 3 or 4, well, perhaps it's a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment or otherwise a house. And we look strategically as well to make sure that perhaps that accommodation is close by to where schools might be, or perhaps where our client might be working.
Okay, Mrs. Simon. So I think people might have this problem. So as a MARA registered immigration lawyer, so what is skill migration to Australia?
Skilled migration is the process of allowing skilled individuals from overseas to come into Australia to meet skills gaps. By implication, that word there, skilled, means that a person cannot be essentially poorly qualified or working in a lower skilled job. And by a lower skilled job, I mean something that doesn't require a trades qualification, or perhaps doesn't require a university qualification. So most of the approved occupations on the Australian government's list for migration to Australia will need a trades or a university qualification, and usually some experience along with them, although that's not always the case. So it's not, the skilled migration program is not about placing people or giving people an opportunity in lower skilled occupations. It is occupations like engineers or trades occupations like motor mechanics or chefs or cooks or restaurant managers and so forth. But a very broad range of occupations. There's over 400 there, and the requirements for individuals vary according to the occupation. But once again, I guess the idea of the skilled migration program is that the right type of person should be given a visa, which means that you don't need to have a whole lot of money behind you in your bank account, because you're being given a visa because you should be the right type of person to find employment in Australia in that skilled occupation.
So, Mr. Simon, so let's get this clear. So let's get into points actually. What are the minimum qualifications that a client need to have to apply to this skill migration to Australia? What are the minimum qualifications? Educational qualifications, work experiences? Minimum.
Okay, so that is perhaps a typical question that somebody might ask if they're trying to get an understanding around the skilled migration program for Australia. There is no minimum qualification, because I should reiterate that depending on the occupation, the qualifications and requirements are different. So, for example, a graduate engineer with a 4-year engineering degree doesn't need any work experience, whereas a marketing specialist with a bachelor in marketing needs to have at least 1 year of work experience. But a bachelor degree isn't a requirement. A cook, for example, only needs a diploma level qualification and then work experience on top. So this is the reason why somebody who's looking at skilled migration should not try and understand what the situation is for every occupation. They should ask for an individual assessment of what the requirements are for them and their situation.
So it depends on the case, right?
It's a case-by-case basis. That's right.
Okay. So, Mr. Simon, let's say if a client only has his advanced level, grade 12 qualification, but he has 6+ years of experiences, like let's say a mechanic. So what are the programs that you can suggest for him? Do you have any programs that you can suggest for him? Options?
I'm going to say to you that a mechanic who's only got an advanced level of schooling qualification is not likely to be perhaps a very successful mechanic, even if he or she is a good mechanic, because mechanics will generally study at a vocational college for at least a couple of years through certificates, perhaps through to diploma level. But if I give you another example of an occupation or occupations where somebody doesn't need work experience and they don't need to have even finished high school, it could be an IT occupation like a software engineer, where the software engineer has been working for 6+ years and is then able to write about their skills and prove what their skills are. Well, that person doesn't need to have any academic qualifications to have their skills assessed in their occupation. And generally what we're talking about in academic and work experience requirements are requirements for a skills assessment, which is one step of the migration process.
Okay. And Mrs. Simon, is there any age limit to this skill migration program?
There is, and that currently that age limit is 45. So somebody has to be under 45 at the time that they're invited to apply for a visa. Yeah.
Okay. So currently, what are the skill migration programs you have?
Well, the Immigration Department has 3 visas in the skilled migration program, 2 of which are permanent visas and one which is a temporary visa. A permanent visa outcome is the best visa outcome that a person can get, whether they've again come through the skilled migration program or perhaps a family program as a partner or as a parent and so forth, because it has no restrictions on it. The temporary skilled visa does, and it says that people can't live in certain cities of Australia for 3 years. There are 3 visas there, and all Australian visas have got numbers on them, and these are in order 189, 190, 491. When I assess somebody for their migration to Australia, I will set out to them and explain to them which visa they are eligible for. It's usually the case that somebody who's a bit older or who doesn't have a lot of work experience might need to look to the temporary visa because it's a little bit easier to get. But in terms of the way that our business operates to serve people, we have 3 discrete programs which deliver slightly different outcomes. So one is just our migration program, which takes people through to a visa result. We have the Migration Plus program, which takes people through to a visa, but also assists them in settling into Australia, and also leads them through to a job outcome. And we have a migration premium package, which takes people to what the Migration Plus does, but with a job where they will earn over $150,000 a year in Australia. So that's a superior level of income. So 3 different skilled visas to Australia and 3 different programs that are unique to My New Australian Life, which is my business.
So the client can choose the program, right?
They can choose a program depending on their, on their needs and their level of comfort about, what they want when they come to Australia, but also depending on their finances, because each of those programs that I've mentioned comes at a different cost.
Okay. So in Sri Lanka, a lot of Sri Lankans are facing this English proficiency test things. So is it mandatory to this program, Mrs. Simon? English proficiency test is mandatory, or?
It is mandatory for the person who is what we call the primary applicant. So secondary applicants may not need to have an English test, but certainly it's mandatory for the primary applicant. So primary applicant, let's say it's me. Secondary applicant could be my wife and or my children. So all Sri Lankans who are the primary applicant will need to take an English language test. The 2 most common tests are the general IELTS test, and the score there is out of 9 in each of the 4 bands of reading, writing, listening and speaking. And the primary applicant would need a level of at least 6. That's a minimum. If they do an alternative test, alternative test is the PTE test, and in that test they need 50 out of 90 again in those 4 areas.
Yes. So in your program, are you providing any English proficiency sessions, or is there any program to that?
We certainly do. We want to be a one-stop shop is one way of expressing it, I guess, so that people don't need to leave us to achieve certain things as we go along to take them through to a visa outcome. So we don't say to people, go away, come back with an English test, and then we'll start other aspects of the process. We have an internal English language department that counsels and prepares our students for an English language test. And it doesn't matter how long they're in there preparing for, and people may need different levels according to, for a number of different reasons. So we prepare people for either a general IELTS test, sometimes an academic IELTS test, where a teacher, for example, needs to take that test, and also for the PTE test. We provide them with practice tests which are paid for on their behalf. and then we will book and pay for the test that they need to take on the day, when the client is ready to take it. So after they've succeeded in the practice tests, the client agrees with their personal tutor, and we call those tutors coaches. Yes, I'm ready to take the test. We get it booked and done, and the results come back shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and Mr. Simon Mander, how long it will take to get done this program, skin migration program?
It's a little bit slow at the moment because of processing in at the Australian Immigration Department. So most of our skilled clients will go through in 15, perhaps 18 months. There's a number of steps that are involved. We'd like it to be faster because our message, the message we'd love to give is, look, you can start the process. We'll have you in Australia in 6 months. But we can't do that. Anybody who's suggesting that this is a process of just a few months is either mistaken or they're not telling the truth. So, and I don't like people yelling at me. I'd rather tell them the truth and say, look, it's 15 to 18 months across this journey. It's the same amount of time or more for people who are looking at other countries around the world as well. So the USA, 3 to 5 years, Canada's certainly probably a little bit more than Australia and so forth. So just the amount of time it takes to go through certain steps, be invited to apply, and then have somebody's visa application processed.
So the truth is it takes time, right, Mr. Simon?
It's like anything good, it takes time.
Yeah, okay. So earlier you said the visa categories are 491 and 190, right?
190 and 491. Yes, I just put it in a slide.
So yes. Are those the all categories, or like we have a chance to get another visa also? Do you have a chance?
No. They are what I call the General Skilled Migration Program visas. There's no other visas that exist in that program. From time to time, when somebody overseas has a definitive job offer from an eligible Australian employer, they can come in under the employer-sponsored migration program, which is different. But this is the way for people to come in by themselves. It gives them absolute freedom when they're here about where they work and where they go and so forth. So these are the 3 visas under the General Skilled Migration Program.
So, Mr. Simon, is it depend on the case? Like, how do the client know the client is going to get this category or that category? Is there any chance that the client to get to know what is the category what is the visa category that he's going to get?
There is every chance because I guess if a person didn't understand what they were going to get, they wouldn't be inclined to start the process, and it would all be quite mysterious. So what we ask for clients or potential clients initially is for a copy of their resume and information, perhaps around their date of birth and the number of family members that might be included in an application. And that helps us start with an initial assessment. We might then have questions around the grade levels that somebody's achieved in their university qualification, for example, or we might have a question around whether or not a teacher had 45 days of supervised teaching practice in their studies. We ask questions for a particular reason, and that is so that we can put together what I think is a 7-page assessment report that we give to clients for free, which sets out the reasons that they are eligible for a visa. And essentially, if a person is given that, then they know that they've got a professional assessment done by a business that's backed with 21 years experience. And that explains why they're eligible and what the visa's for. If somebody has given us all of their information, their resume, and they've answered questions and they don't get that free assessment report, it means that they're going to get an email that says that they're not eligible and we can't help them. So we don't encourage people, it's against the Migration Agent's Code of Conduct to encourage people to lodge applications where they won't be successful. It might be the case that somebody's not going to be successful with a visa application until the very last stage, for example, with a medical issue. And all the other steps, English and skills assessment and state government nominations, can all be met. But there's no point in doing all of those if there's going to be a problem at the very end. So we provide a free comprehensive assessment that's based on 21 years of experience. And if somebody gets that, then They don't need to ask, how do I know if I'm eligible? Would I, am I a good chance for a visa? It means that they meet the requirements prima facie to go forward and take up Australian residence.
Okay, we all know that you have more than 20 plus years of experiences in this field. So how many success stories we can talk about? If we get it in account, Mr. Simon?
I'm not very good at counting. Maths is not my strong suit. And having worked for a very long period of time, it means that I really can't be sure. But I suspect if I do some math in my head and I think about the number of current clients that I've got and the clients that I'd have at any one time, we're certainly talking several thousand individuals, and that includes the primary applicants and their family members that I've helped come to Australia over the 20 plus years. So I'm consistently busy, which is good, but yeah, so that leads to a lot of success stories, and the success stories happen because we are very careful at the beginning about who we tell is eligible and who we say we're able to help. So we don't have to worry about failures because we look for problems at the beginning, and we're very thorough in that first exploration stage when we're meeting with a potential client.
Yeah. And also, Mr. Simon, what makes this program special? What are the plus points? What are the advantages that using this program except the other programs? Is there any of the advantages?
Well, I think if I look at in terms of talking about advantages, the biggest advantage or the biggest plus is the actual end result. So is it just a visa in hand that gives somebody the opportunity to start a new life for them or them and their family? Or is it that outcome of settlement as well as the visa and as well as a job? And what was the process of getting that outcome like? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Was it relatively worry-free? And that's what we're trying to deliver as well.
Okay, Mr. Simon. For now, that's what we wanted to ask you. Thank you so much for the information that you have gave us. Thank you so much for joining with us, Mr. Simon Mander.
Okay, that's
See
a pleasure.
you soon.
Okay, thanks then. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.